Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be talking about the discourse and construction of social class on TV, and specifically, I'm going to be using the shows Schitt's Creek and Two Broke Girls. And even though these shows are both comedies, they actually teach viewers a lot about how society views wealth, poverty, and who deserves success. And my main argument is that Schitt's Creek protects the identity of the wealthy even after they lose their money, while Two Broke Girls stereotypes the working class and blames them for their struggles. As such, both shows suggest that social class comes from personal choices and identity, such as taste, lifestyle, and power, instead of structural inequality. So, let's start with Schitt's Creek. In the first episode, the Rose family loses everything and has to move to a rundown motel in a town they once bought as a joke. But even though they move from the credential to the contingent class, the group that lives paycheck to paycheck, the show still treats them like they are naturally above everyone else around them and are at the top of the hierarchy of their town. This connects to the concept of social stratification, which our lecture explains is a system that ranks people based on power and perceived social wealth. And we also see that Moira freaks out about the motel sheets because of how dirty they are. David shows annoyance towards the motel receptionist, and overall the family is constantly reminding people that they used to be wealthy. So these are examples of how their disgust becomes a part of their joke. And this also connects perfectly to our reading by Stephanie Lawler, where she says that the middle class identity is produced through opposition and disgust toward the perceived characteristics, including lack of taste, knowledge, and the right ways of being and doing of the working class, page 432. So in other words, the Roses keep their higher class identity by looking down on everyone around them, and disgust is how they make that social boundary between them and the working class, or the other. And we also see that the town residents aren't taken seriously or as real people. They exist as comedy obstacles for the Rose family. And in this way, the sitcom normalizes the Rose's behavior and reinforces a social Darwinist message that people are naturally more capable and worthy, that wealthy people are more naturally capable and worthy, while poor people are seen as flawed. So essentially, the Roses see poor people as less capable and even dangerous, and their attitude suggests that people who are struggling financially are that way because of personal failure, not because of unfair systems. So instead of caring about why the town is so poor or how to improve the living conditions, the show depicts the locals as people who must be avoided or laughed at. So again, the strong, quote-unquote, wealthy deserve to stay on top, while the weak, quote-unquote, poor are naturally stuck below. And social Darwinism encourages society to protect the middle and upper class from this dangerous working class. So now let's look at Two Broke Girls. In episode 1, Max is seen as working two minimum low-wage jobs to pay her rent. She works at a diner and has a babysitter job, and this emphasizes how bad her economic situation is. And in the episode, we also hear that Paulina gets fired for doing sexual activities while on the job, and that her uniform is moist, smelly, and has a clam chowder stain, which reinforces what our lecture said about media stereotypes of the poor and working class. Not only is she portrayed as irresponsible or lacking self-control, but she's portrayed as disgusting and smelly. And when it comes to Caroline, who was formerly rich, she's introduced as smarter, more capable, better dressed, and more deserving, quote-unquote, than everyone around her. We see this through how she judges Mac's small apartment and the dirty uniforms. And when she talks about starting a cupcake business, the show suggests that her education and good taste can help her and Max move towards upward social mobility, which reinforces the idea that class mobility is always possible if you just try hard enough and act the right way. Or, in other words, the myth of meritocracy, where if you work hard, have courage and talent, then success is possible. And ultimately, the show is showing how the situation is their own fault. This connects to what the lecture is described as blaming the victim, meaning that it's easier to blame poor people for the situation, and that being a part of the working class is due to personality failure rather than structural disadvantage. So being broke becomes a sign of personal failure, not inequality. And when it comes to comparing these two shows side by side, we see that they are talking about class from two different class perspectives and two different messages, giving us two different messages about how class works in America. First, the class position of the characters is different. In Schitt's Creek, the Rose family begins at the top. They were ultra wealthy and part of the credential class with access to power and luxury, but they obviously fall down the class diamond. Meanwhile, the two broke girls start at the opposite end. Max is already deep in the contingent class, and Caroline joins her there, but she brings all the aspects of having higher class privilege, like education and the belief in entrepreneurship. And these shows create two different discussions of class. In Schitt's Creek, wealth is tied to personality. The Roses are treated as special even when they're broke, and the message is that rich people have lots of value and that poverty is just a temporary inconvenience for them. But in Two Broke Girls, being poor is treated as a permanent personality trait, something that's embarrassing and funny. And the show makes their struggles seem like a result of their flaws or lack of motivation, which matches what the narrator from the documentary Class Dismissed, How TV Frames a Working Class said. Quote unquote, TV reproduces the deeply ingrained belief that workers' inadequacies are to blame for their lack of advancement. Minute 32 and 47 seconds. So in other words, if you're struggling financially, television makes it seem like it's something you did wrong. And the documentary also states that the boundaries of social class are now more restricted than ever at 33 minutes. So if anything, it's actually harder for people to move up, not easier. But TV still sells this fantasy that social mobility is available to everyone. So yeah, both shows center around money problems, and they send opposite message. Schitt's Creek, that rich people may fall down, but they're still better than everyone else. And Two Broke Girls, that poor people are stuck where they are no matter how hard they work. But yeah, in conclusion, both shows use comedy to hide the seriousness of class inequality, and they hide real inequality by pretending that richness comes from good character, poverty comes from personal failure. They reinforce the exact myth our lecture warned us about, that the American dream works for everyone. And in both shows, the system is never the problem. If anything, class inequality is portrayed as something natural and just the way the world works. But ultimately, as a final thought, TV doesn't just entertain us, it teaches us who deserves comfort, who deserves struggle, and why the system doesn't change. And these are my references. Thank you.